Hello and welcome into another episode of the Fantasy Football Forecast. I'm your host, Trevor Scott, joined by my co-host, Matt Giraldi. We're back on the mics together, coming at you with another 10-team Superflex 3 wide receiver PPR mock draft. So very excited to get into this one. If you like the content in this video, hit that like button. If you want to see more of us, hit the subscribe button. All right, so looking at the draft board, I'm going to take the 4 spot. Matt, you're going to take the 8 spot. So pretty expected, right? Allen, Jackson, and Chase off the board. And you guys all know my preference at this point in the offseason. I'm going to be taking Jaden Daniels from this spot pretty much every time. I've got those 4 at the top of my overall rankings.
You love yourself some Jaden Daniels. This makes this pick very easy for me, someone who I still have as my wide receiver 3, but I am tempted to push him to wide receiver 2. I know Jefferson's kind of dealing with a little bit of a hamstring, but the only reason I haven't done it is the fact that Addison is going to be suspended for 3 games. So assuming he's good to go, he'll just be getting peppered with targets. But CeeDee Lamb is someone who, we're a year removed from him being the wide receiver 1 in fantasy. And if I can get him this late in the draft, I am all over that. So swinging back around, the big 3 at the running back position are gone, so I'm probably just going to wait at that position. And the big 5 at the quarterback position are gone. So I'm just going to load up on wide receiver here and take who is my number 4 in Puka Nacua. And I noticed with Sleeper, it's like Puka is pushed down to wide receiver 6 or 7. So I've been getting quite a bit of him in that spot.
Yeah, and, he's showing up at 17 overall. So it's like, okay, well, it's kind of a pipe dream for me to be able to get Puka, knowing that you also have him at 4. That he's going to be going, early in the second round, it feels like. So, for me, that's not as huge of a deal because I do still like the receivers on the board at this point in the draft, right? As much as I would like to get Puka, getting Brian Thomas is a pretty nice consolation prize for me because I have Brian Thomas at wide receiver 6. I have him ranked ahead of Neighbors. I have Amon-Ra 1 spot ahead of him, but getting any of that tier, I feel like is a very good thing. And you see London and AJ Brown go before Nico Collins. That's been an interesting thing I've been seeing more. I don't know if it's just a computer thing on Sleeper or whatever, but Nico, obviously we both have in that tier above those guys. So, if you can get Nico at the beginning of the 3rd round or even at the end of the 2nd round in your 10-team Superflex leagues, that's an awesome value. Swinging back around now, right? No more receivers here really for me to take unless I'm going to go Ladd. So I could go Ladd, but the guy I am going to take is Devon Achane. I'm going to kind of go with that 1 of each in my first 3 rounds and then build out the rest of my team from there. Ladd McConkey is obviously dealing with the fact that Keenan Allen just signed. So as Charger fans, we're pumped about that. From a fantasy perspective, maybe he can increase his efficiency. I still think he's going to be the number 1. I still expect his volume to increase from last year. So I've seen people saying that they'd knock him in the rankings, but I'm really not knocking him at all in the rankings. He's still going to stay right at 10 for me.
Yeah, and that's a pretty electric trio as far as playmakers go. Plus, it's fun to pair Jaden Daniels and Brian Thomas Jr., obviously college teammates. So looking at my board, there is quite a bit of noise. I don't want to say noise, kind of a big group of wide receivers that I would be somewhat interested in. So I will wait at that position. Tight end, I'm tempted to go Kittle just because I think he's going to have a monster season and that wide receiver room is a little bit of a mess right now. At running back, I'm looking at Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs as well. So maybe what I'll do is I will take JT. I think he is in for a good season. He obviously finished extremely strong, and then that allows me to potentially build out more of a hero running back approach. Now, unfortunately, Baker Mayfield does go off the board, so that was someone I was hoping would swing back to me. It is interesting. Team 10 went on Hurts and Baker. So looking back at the running back position, wide receiver position, I still have this guy, wide receiver 12, and it makes me so nervous because he always misses time, but on a points per game basis, he is fantastic. And hopefully later in the draft, I can find some value at wide receiver, maybe on the waiver wire. So if Higgins does miss a few games, I can plug that in, but there's no doubting his upside when he's on the field.
Yeah, and when did you turn into the T. Higgins guy? I mean, come on.
Know,
did you used to just trash Higgins? I know. And now you see that points per game, dude. You can't resist.
I'm so just not confident with who my number 12 wide receiver is. And it's like, I don't know. I don't think I'm going to get him in our league because I know I'm going to be kicking and screaming when something does happen or if he has a bad game, etc. But I don't know.
Yeah, no, I get it, and that's the reason I highlight that after you said number 12 is that's a huge inflection point in the rankings and in the draft, right? Is once the top 11 receivers go, we both are very much struggling with the position at that point, which is why we kind of suggest lots of receivers up top. I mean, the Lamb Puka start makes it so you don't have to take Higgins. You can, but it's much more comforting to take him as a 3 than as your 1. So
yeah.
All right, so moving on down to my pick now. Chase Brown didn't make it. That's unfortunate. I would have liked that, but Josh Jacobs is a pretty good consolation prize there, right? We're talking about how we don't love the receivers. Jacobs is still in my second tier of running backs, so I'm going to be all over that. Unfortunately, Tyreek Hill, who I have as my wide receiver 12, didn't make it back to me, but I'm going to still go back to receiver. And even though he's not in camp, even though there's still that contract dispute, I do expect it to get figured out. And I'm going to pair McLaurin with Jaden Daniels.
Look how much Hampton is already getting pushed up by Sleeper. That is, I mean, ahead of Cook, Walker. I know, we're obviously very high on him. We just did a tier breakdown between Hampton, Kamara, and Walker. So if you're interested in that, check it out. But yeah, it is interesting to see Sleeper push him up so much. So looking back at my board, there are a couple running backs that I just mentioned, Walker and Kamara, both guys that I really like. Take a peek at the wide receiver position. Nothing too interesting. And the quarterback position can probably wait because Team 9 has one quarterback. Maybe he takes another. Team 10 already has 2 quarterbacks. So I'm going to go back to the well at running back and take Ken Walker.
Yeah, another guy where it feels like the tier break happens pretty quickly right around him. There's him, and then there's not really anybody obvious after that, right? Like I currently have Trevion Henderson ranked as the next running back after him, but it kind of feels like for me, Henderson and Chuba are kind of a tier, and then you get into like James Conner, who obviously has the injury concerns, would be great if without it. But yeah, I like the running back pick there.
Yeah, and it is interesting because Henderson still is on the board, so I can plug him in to my flex spot as well. Usually I wait a little bit longer on that third running back, but I don't know. You kind of just have to play the way the board falls to you. Like in our home team or in our home league last year, I mean, when you and I were mocking, I was taking like 4 wide receivers right off the jump. And then all of a sudden we get into our draft and I've got, 3 running backs in the first 6 picks. So I don't want to wait too long on quarterback. There are a lot of guys that I really like, but in Superflex, there is some risk in waiting too long. And if you get shut out or there's a big run or, I know the computer doesn't really take third running backs on Sleeper, but a lot of your league mates might. So I'll just go with the guy that I have actually, I'm going to do something different. I've got Purdy 1 spot behind Goff, but maybe Goff makes it back to me. Maybe not because you're on this board, but I'll play a little bit of that ADP game. But I like both those guys quite a bit.
Yeah. And, obviously knowing your league, knowing how to play the board, when you're down in this area, right, you got to notice too that multiple teams already have 2 quarterbacks too that are going through here. So the chances that, 4 quarterbacks go, I think is pretty good. And, how I like to draft where I go up top with 1. Maybe I take Goff in round 7, but I'm definitely not going to take him here. So the next guy that I'm going to take here is, I guess a little bit of a talking point because I haven't taken him in any of these mocks outside of when I did 5 to 8 when I had to draft all of these players. And it's somebody that I recently moved up a lot in my rankings to wide receiver 23. So I still do have him 2 spots behind DK Metcalf, who is who I would otherwise have picked. But I'm going to take Ted McMillan. I'm starting to get pretty excited about the volume and about the opportunity share and about the fact that Bryce Young should be much better. He was way better over the last 8 weeks. And you look at season-long stats and all the projection systems that you're going to be looking at in the offseason are going to look at season-long stats. And I just don't know how predictive that is for the Panthers. I think they might just be significantly better on offense this year than they were last year. And that kind of is getting me excited about Ted. So I'm feeling good there. May and Goff go, so I'm not going to get the quarterback that I wanted necessarily with Goff, but I'm still going to go back to quarterback at this position because I still do believe in Dak Prescott. I did recently move him down to quarterback 12, but I still have a lot of faith in the upside that he presents, and it's mostly just injury risk, because you look at his player card and it's significantly worse than you would expect out of injuries, right? You go and look, and he played 8 games, and then he played a full season, but 12, 16 missed a game, 5 missed, so it's littered with injuries. So at this point, I'm not saying he's injury prone or anything like that. It's just something that's in the back of my mind more than it was early in the offseason.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping that you were going to pass on him, but I didn't actually think you would, because that would have been an interesting decision for me to make, whether or not to stack Dak with CeeDee Lamb. Now, there's a lot of risk in that, because if one goes down, the other's value plummets as well, but a whole ton of upside with that. But obviously that's not an option. So this makes this next pick pretty obvious for me. I still have a tier break at the running back position after James Conner. We know the story with Conner. When he's on the field, he's top 12. So I think, I'm very confident in that pick. Now I'm definitely not going to go in on any more running backs for a while. So at the quarterback position, another tier break I see, at least for me personally. I know if you want to argue the upside of Justin Fields, I totally get it. But in Superflex, I've got him pushed down one spot below Jordan Love. I think Jordan Love's kind of a really solid bounce back candidate this year. He basically, in week 1 last season, we thought he was going to be out for the whole season. Then he only misses 2 games. Obviously wasn't himself. The team shifts to very run heavy. And then what do? They draft a first round wide receiver, and they're going to have to throw the ball more this season. Their defense is not just going to be shutting out the NFC North and the rest of the league. So I'm getting excited about Love. I'm finding myself taking him more and more. And we've seen the ceiling as QB5 in 2023.
Yeah. And for me, I struggle with Love because in my most recent ranking update, I dropped him 5 spots in the quarterback rankings. And now I feel like I'm regretting it. I feel like I need to move him back up. He's not going to be dealing with the MCL. We saw him be much bigger or have much bigger impact in the rushing game 2 years ago than he did last year. And I really think the injury was a big reason for that. And Matthew Golden is absolutely lighting up camp, seizing that number 1 job. That's the kind of coach speak that I like to hear, like running away or might be one of the best route runners or all this stuff that's getting hyped around him. So I'm as a Packer fan too, so I'm obviously a Charger fan, but I am a Packer fan as well. I'm getting bought back into the Jordan Love hype.
The only thing I don't like about Matthew Golden is his number 22.
22.
Like, what are we doing?
Yeah, it's like a weird number. Yeah, it's like a running back number.
Yeah, I don't know. It kind of bothers me. And it's funny because I've changed my tune on Golden quite a bit after I took him in our rookie draft. I was like very, not low on Golden, but it's like he wasn't productive. He didn't break out. He wasn't the best player on Texas. And then now I'm like, he's on my rookie draft. So I'm getting fed the propaganda on Twitter right now. So I'm buying in.
Yeah, and I am too. I really think that, top end speed and the route running is really good, right? And that the game can evolve at the next level, right? Projectability, not necessarily something you always get. Next guy, this pick is decently easy for me, even though David Montgomery is here and I usually take him. Those are usually in hero RB builds that I like race to the board to take David Montgomery. But in this situation, I've got Achane at Jacobs. I feel like my receivers need a little bit more help, and I'm going to take Jameson Williams. I have very few teams where I get the opportunity to take him at the end of the 8th round. And I recently moved him up in my wide receiver rankings to 25 as well. I feel very good about him. Overall, great offense. And I just feel like, maybe some weeks his floor is going to bottom out. But overall, I think that he should be pretty consistently involved in the offense there in Detroit. So Montgomery goes off. Unfortunately, I don't get to go in that direction. And this is the point in the draft now where I feel like it's just like I get left behind. I'm just like, I don't want any of these guys anymore. It's not like I have some big sleeper that's like sitting down here waiting to get picked or anything like that. And I like feeling like that, but so I'm going to go a little bit chalk here and take DeAndre Swift. That's somebody that I have ranked just outside my top 20 running backs. They didn't bring in any competition. We've talked about that at length. And Kyle Monangai did get first team reps this week in camp. So they're checking in on what they have in the rookie. But I think he's more in a competition with Roschon Johnson versus threatening DeAndre Swift at all for a role.
Yeah, and looking at my team, I've got three pretty good wide receivers, so I definitely want to go back to the well with that. The fact that I have, this is usually the point where I would take Jacoby Myers, and maybe I'll take him in the next round. But the fact that I have three kind of studs or guys in my top 12, or at the very least top 15 at the top, I can be a little bit more aggressive with this fourth wide receiver, someone who has a little bit more upside, and that is Calvin Ridley.
This year's Terry McLaurin. If you have to plant the flag on something in these late rounds, I feel better and better about that every time. I've been moving him up and up. I recently moved him to like 33, I think, in my wide receiver rankings. So like way up from like the 45 I had him at. And yeah, I'm definitely back in on Ridley, especially in the 9th round.
Yeah, no, I think you said it really well. And I think Cam Ward, all the reviews so far from camp are positive, and that was kind of his personality coming into the draft. I'm sure you saw that clip from, I don't know, it was like before the combine when Shador was like, let's make a song together. And Cam Ward's like, no, I don't want to go play football, man. So that's kind of who he is. That's kind of who he is in a nutshell, 5 a.m. every day. And I think, the fact that he was kind of the least talked about number one pick at the quarterback position, like maybe ever, allows him to fly under the radar a little bit too. And the fact that he's on the Titans, it's not like Caleb Williams coming into Chicago where it's this storied franchise. He's got all the hype. So I think maybe that'll be good for him. But looking back to my pick, I'm just going to go take Mr. Jacoby Myers. Again, if Higgins misses games, that's someone I can easily plug into my lineup.
Yeah, too easy there. Somebody that I'm going to take now is Ricky Pearsall. He's kind of the last man standing in the 49ers, with the 49ers wide receiver group. So I feel like I don't have to overthink that one too much. At this point in the draft, second bench spot, and fifth wide receiver, I do like Pearsall quite a bit, and I feel like he can provide some big time value if he is going to start the year as the only one that's healthy. So fingers crossed there on Pearsall. I am a little bit shaky on him. I'm maybe not as like, oh, he's going to break out as a lot of the other reports you'll hear about him. But I do find myself gravitating towards him. And then after he got past you, I had a good feeling that I was going to get David Njoku. That's just literally my default 11th round pick. If he's there in the 11th round, I'm going to be taking David Njoku. I considered him at round 10 as well. And in a real draft, I might take him in the 10th. But that's been just the easiest pick to plan for of all time with sleeper drafts.
Yeah, and looking at teams 9 and 10, they do have Laporta and Bowers, so I don't have to worry about them going in on a second tight end. So I'll wait for the next round on that. And then, unfortunately, Golden is gone. That would have been an interesting potential stack with Jordan Love, but someone who is continuing to fly up boards, and someone who in a lot of leagues might be a starter from week 1 to week 2, et cetera, if Chris Godwin does start on the pup. And that's Emeka Egbuka.
Man. I love him. I just moved him up to 32 in my wide receiver rankings. And he was the other guy I was looking at versus Pearsall. I have them ranked a couple spots apart, but I did move Egbuka above Pearsall. I was just playing that ADP game a little too much. So I got to make sure I have my rankings printed out for our draft.
Yeah, and for anyone that's, you've got your list of sleepers or guys that you're a little bit higher on, don't think that you have to wait that extra round. Like when you're this deep in the draft and you're kind of trying to play that ADP game and Ibuka's your guy and you're hoping that he's going to get past the other guys, just take him. If it's between he and Jaden Reed or someone that you're not necessarily super confident in, just go ahead and get your guy. So I did mention.
And I want to highlight one other thing. Sorry to interrupt. I know it's your pick. The other reason or the other like highlighted point on that is you never know what other people in your actual league are going to think of guys. And somebody for both of us that we were on all last offseason, the whole time was Brian Thomas Jr. We were all over him. We both wanted him. And then literally somebody in our league who listens to us every day, you know who you are if you're out there, drafted him in the 9th round. And we were both like, oh, that's like 2.5 rounds above ADP. And do you think he cared that he used a 9th round pick to get Brian Thomas Jr.? Like, no. Okay. Just when you're that late, if you have a guy you want, you feel some level of conviction, especially if we haven't seen him yet, like Egbuka, just pick him where you feel like you have to make sure that he's on your team.
That is a fantastic call out. So back to my team here. I am going to go in on tight end, and someone I have, I believe I have him as tight end 7 right now, and that's Tucker Kraft. And I think I've said this before, I'm not huge on stacking, but when it is a tight end who you basically need to score a touchdown anyway, and I'm going to be starting Jordan Love, so I think that just kind of presents a little bit of a bonus at a position that isn't so great.
Yeah, I'm coming around on Kraft a little bit too. I'm a little worried about the groin injury because he's not currently practicing. But who's the number 2 for the Packers?
Musgrave.
No, who's the number 2 pass catcher in their offense?
I mean, Reed,
Kraft,
Dobbs,
right? Like maybe,
yeah. Like
right?
I don't know. Yeah,
like that's what I'm saying. I'm coming around on Kraft, so I actually kind of like that pick quite a bit. I know in dynasty circles he's looked at like the darling of the position. So, I think, there's a situation where he comes out and has 4 catches, 65 yards on 6 targets and a touchdown in week 1. And we're all like, oh, no, like, were we really going to draft Jonnu over him? Like, I don't know about that. So I like Kraft. Another great reason to wait at the position, honestly. All right, going to my pick, since you didn't end up picking him in this draft and we're in the 12th round, it's very interesting for me to get Stephon Diggs. I don't get him very often because I'm usually drafting with you and you usually take him. But I do think that there's opportunity here. He looks great in camp. That's like the biggest thing, I think, at this point, coming off the injury. But overall, excited to have him in a draft finally. And so I feel like I got to go back to running back now, because I do have quite a few receivers. So I've got 6 receivers and only 3 running backs. So looking down the board, and also if the sleeper algorithm would pick a 3rd quarterback, I might be feeling the heat a little bit to pick a 3rd quarterback at this point in the draft. I feel like that always gets lost in these mocks, is that, this portion of the draft just doesn't pick quarterbacks. But I still need a running back. So the guy I'm going to go in is Tajay Spears. I'm not a huge fan of his, obviously, with how Pollard and Spears split turned out last year, but he was really good down the stretch when Pollard got hurt, and I do hope that there could be a little bit more of a split for him this year. So that's a little bit more of a dart throw. And he's not one of my favorite players to take because I always talk about maximizing roster spot usage, and I feel like he's one after 1 week. If he's not out there and Tony Pollard plays 70% of the snaps, he's a cut. And so I'm not a huge fan of players like that, but I'm going to take a shot on him here.
So you mentioned it with the quarterback position. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to take a 3rd, but I'm going to pretend that the computer or our league would have already taken a few of the guys up top. And I do want to talk about someone who is buried down very far, who I would never in a million years take as my 2nd quarterback, but as my 3rd. There's no doubting the upside, but he can obviously also be a cut, and that's Anthony Richardson. And I do want to call it out because Sleeper has him buried, in the Russell Wilson, Tyler Shuck, Jackson Dart kind of range. So if your league mates aren't looking and you are, I know one of the buddies in our home league who's also in our dynasty league, he's just getting fed Anthony Richardson content on Twitter right now. And he's like, guys, he looks great. He looks great. So if you're bought in, by all means take him, but take him as your 3rd. And then swinging back around, there's a lot of running backs that are kind of noisy, but someone I do want to talk about and I do want to take here because I have a feeling that you might take him as well, is Dylan Sampson. So this is a guy who is my most owned player in best ball, much to my surprise and lucky enough.
Over Keenan Allen?
Over Keenan Allen. I think I've got 24% Keenan, 25% Sampson, and then I also have like 26. Yeah, so I also have a lot of Cedric Tillman too. So we'll see. I don't love being that invested in the Browns, but the long story short is that this guy is going to continue to be buried on Sleeper. They've shown that they don't update their algorithm, right? They're still pushing Quinshon Judkins up to wide receiver or to running back 22. He hasn't signed, and I know, he was supposed to go higher than the 4th round, and I don't think that Cleveland necessarily planned on taking him. They were just like, how is this guy here? We may as well. So if he gets any runway, especially as the season goes on and the Judkins situation doesn't get settled, I think he could be a really good sleeper for this season.
Yeah, and before the NFL draft, in dynasty circles, that's where you start to like cultivate your pure dynasty rookie running back rankings, anybody that does drafts before the NFL draft takes place, like Dylan Sampson was getting ranked as that 5th or 6th running back, kind of neck and neck with Caleb Johnson. And so it's not like he is just a nobody. Like in last year's draft class, he might have been the first running back taken. So, he's definitely a big time talent, even though he went in the 4th round. So, and I think the Browns, they're starting to talk like they're moving forward this season without Quinshon Judkins. So, he'll sign eventually. I think there's some optimism about that, but they don't know exactly how that situation is going to play out. So, like Judkins for now is like kind of completely off my board in redraft, and Sampson is absolutely somebody I want to get in on. All right, so at this point, I'm going to draft a quarterback. I'm going to do the same thing you did, kind of assume most of the quarterbacks would be gone by this point. And then I'm going to go in on Aaron Rodgers. I have him in our Dynasty League, and I do think that, he could be decent in this Steelers offense. And he's got a big number one to throw down the field to. And I feel like, he should be at least reasonably stable, and he's going to be the starter there. Like, he's not going to get benched. So at least I will have a third that I can keep on my roster. And then Tank Bigsby is the guy that I wanted to draft last, but that did not work out. I recently moved Bigsby ahead of Travis Etienne in my rankings. So, you see Etienne go in the 10th round, Bigsby go in the 15th. That's something that I think needs to be rectified. Bigsby's been running as the number one running back in camp. He's not going to get a ton of the passing game work, but if he's getting most of, if not all of, the early down work, and then is also working at the goal line, I just have a really hard time believing that there's going to be anybody else on the team that's going to have very much fantasy relevance. So maybe ETN settles into a role where he's going to actually be getting a significant number of targets per game. But with running backs, I feel like that role can be just so volatile. The week you need him, the week you throw him in, he gets 2 targets and 2 carries. And Bigsby has 15 carries, and you're like, why isn't ETN? Why isn't ETN? And it's like, well, you know why. It's because you shouldn't have picked him and started to try and rely on him. So, again, ETN feels to me very much like one of those players like Spears, where Bigsby gets 65% of the snaps in week 1, and it's like, oh, ETN is on the cut block here. Like, I want to pick up this receiver that went off in week 1, and ETN is kind of the guy I'm least excited about. So, anyways, I was going to do that diatribe before my pick. So now I'm going to actually make my pick, which is somebody we talked about a lot. It's Rashid Shaheed. Healthy, looking great. Last round, dart throw. Hopefully he can continue to split 1A, 1B with Olave. That's the hope. If you take him, continue to get somewhere in that 7 to 8 target range.
Yeah, and if you need to ever throw him like in your flex in an emergency, it is always good to have kind of a high upside guy like that. So with my last pick, this is typically over the years where I go in on a rookie wide receiver, but there is somebody at the running back position that I do want to talk about. I think it's worth mentioning because he might have a pretty large role in this offense should a couple things happen, right? If Joe Mixon starts the season on the pup, and the reports on Nick Chubb right now from the coaching staff have not really been that glowing. So that person's Woody Marks. So if you've watched, USC over the years, you know that Woody Marks is an excellent pass catcher at the running back position. And I think the thing is with the Texans is their offensive line is kind of a mess, right? So that doesn't exactly bode well for someone like Nick Chubb at this point of his career. But if they're going to have to involve Marks in the passing game and get him on some quick hitters just to get the ball out of CJ Stroud's hands so he's not running for his life back there, I think we could kind of see him in like a Rachaad White style role. That's kind of who I've always compared him to. So I think he's someone that's not really getting drafted in these formats that I think should at least be on your radar.
All right. With that, thank you guys so much for watching. Let us know how we did in the comments, and we'll talk to you in the next one.